Hello, welcome to Scattered Thoughts, the podcast where we talk about cPDH and other magic related things. I'm Joe.
I'm Bobby.
Most of you here probably know about cPDH, the format we mainly talk about, but on the offhand chance you don't, here's how it works. So it is a pauper commander format, so it's all commons within the decks, uncommons within the command zone. Life total has been reduced from 40 to 30 to help with the lower pauper power level, 16 commander damage, and there are two banned cards, Rhystic Study and Mystic Remora, because those cards would be absolutely ridiculous. But it is a competitive minded format, so you got to think about tournaments, faster paced play, trying to win as fast as possible, and large amount of interaction within the deck.
Yeah, I mean, it's real similar to cEDH if you're coming from that space. Lots of people trying to do things early on in the game, maybe not as early on.
Broken things.
Yeah, broken things. Not as early on as, cEDH. We don't have mana crypts and soul rings and all that fun stuff, but, we have ramp, we have turn 1 or 2 wins in Magical Christmas Land with certain decks. So, yeah, there's plenty of broken stuff you can do. There's plenty of fair stuff you can do that still does well. And so, yeah, it's kind of like a powered down cEDH format. You still have access to banned cards that are banned in Vintage or restricted in Vintage, like Treasure Cruise and Brainstorm and all this stuff. So,
Yeah, it's got that fun thing where it's like a legacy type format where it has all the pauper cards, but it gets to be a lower power level because pauper. But then you still get the fun cEDH thing where, I have a singleton deck, but now it's pauper as well. So the deck building gets pretty crazy.
yeah.
Because 99 commons, you get some weird cards in there.
Yeah, and you get a little more variance in the games, which is also nice. Playing with all commons, you don't get Demonic Tutor, Imperial Seal, Mystical Tutor, Worldly
Yeah.
Tutor. Like, if you want to find certain cards, you have to dig for them. We have some certain ways to search with Transmute or some commanders, but for the most part,
Merchant Scroll.
yeah, there's a handful of cards that search, mostly in blue, but yeah, I mean, like, you're gonna play, slower games. You're gonna have to work to get your payoffs and to get your combos. They're not just like find with your 18 different tutors. But I mean, they still happen all the time. So
Yeah, there are very consistent combo decks that are generally built around, one or two similar combo win plans, and they can all find it. So it's not like the decks are inconsistent per se, but the fact that, it's a lot less redundant, especially with tutors, definitely slows it down. Generally, I think usually about turn anywhere from like 7 to 10, I would say is typical. As compared to cEDH, where it's, a good like 2 to 4 from what I understand. But you still get a lot of that fun, like 4 players aiming to all win the game. They're playing lots of interaction. So there's those crazy stack fights, where one player tries to win and everyone else tries to stop them, but they have like 3 pieces of interaction to keep trying to go. So a lot of that really fun stuff from cEDH. But if you think that format might be a little too fast or a little too high power for you, this is a really fun alternative.
yeah, and it's whether it's too fast. I mean, it's also one benefit is this is a super cheap format, all things considered.
Yup,
When
yeah.
you're looking at cEDH, you're talking, we talked about the mana rocks that cost, tons of money. The land bases and those cost thousands of dollars when you're getting into dual lands, fetch lands, Gaia's Cradles. Here, some of the most expensive cards are, you know, $20 or something. Like, there's not a whole lot. Like, Lotus Petal is one of the more expensive cards, and not a lot of
Snuff
decks even
out.
play it. Yeah, Snuff Out. So they're way more affordable, way cheaper. Obviously, if you want to go above and beyond and foil out your deck, you can do that too. There's plenty of cool cards.
Yeah, I know every time I check Bobby's decks on Moxfield, I'm like, there's no way the deck's $1,000. And every time, just because he has the $1,000 lightning bolt selected.
Beta is where it's at. So,
I love it. It's so funny. I'm like, how did this man make $1,000 PDH deck? There ain't no way.
yeah. So, I mean, yeah. So you get the bling. You can play, like, the magic staple cards. Like you said, there's lightning bolt. There's counterspell. There's you could play Sinkhole if you want to, talking about expensive cards. There's you get to play like some of the most like core magic cards, which is really fun. You get to play broken combo stuff if you want to. You get to play really aggressive stuff if you want to. You can play a real mid-rangey toolbox type deck if you want to. You even can play control. I mean,
Yeah.
you can do what you want. There are viable, you know, lists for every strategy you could probably think of. And and they're even like competitive, like you any deck can win. Like there's no deck that's dominating, I would argue. Like there are decks that outperform, but when you're sitting
I think
down,
there's like a couple strategies that are like definitely more consistently powerful, but yeah, there's a lot wider of a range.
yeah, you're not going to find these outliers that have like crazy high performing that deck wins more than 50% of the time.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen if four people are sitting down at a table with a deck that's meant to be played in cPDH. It's just not how it works. Similar to cEDH, it's when everyone's trying to do, very interactive things, try to do, win the game fast and, walk away killing three players or winning the game some other way, before turn 10, you know, someone could get lucky and slide in on turn 3 and there's no one with interaction because they all spent their first few turns developing mana, and then a freed from the real combo deck gets there and wins on turn 3, and all right, next game. So
Yeah, it's a very interesting format. Yeah, I say turn like I think it's at 7 through 10 is about like a pretty average win, but there's decks like I know Malcolm. We have Malcolm because he's an uncommon for some reason. He can win insanely early because if you turn any of the pingers into a pirate, that like something pings when an artifact enters the battlefield, turn it into a pirate. Malcolm hits someone, makes an artifact. The pinger sees that because it's a pirate, makes more treasures, and loop till kill. So there are some very early kills that can happen, but a lot of the times, generally, the fact that you're playing in Pauper means that a lot of your threats are commons. Not great. I gotta be honest. Like the general level of like threat creatures and stuff, not that great. But removal is insane. Like just for example, we have like lightning bolt and snuff out, right? Two like crazy removal spells for this format. But just like random creatures you throw down aren't going to be as great. So that means that like as opposed to cEDH, where a lot of the times you want to almost completely ignore what your opponents are doing a lot of the times and just try to like go for your game plan, cPDH generally ends up being a little bit more interactive. Obviously cEDH is still extremely interactive, with the free counter spells and everything, but this is more like if you're someone who likes to like bolt certain creatures and remove threats here and there, you get a lot more opportunity to do that in this format.
yeah, and like you're saying with the common creatures being not being the threats more often than not, that's another thing. And I mean, granted, this happens in cEDH too, but
Yeah.
depending on the deck, obviously. But in cPDH, your deck is going to rely on your commander a lot more often than it would in cEDH. In cEDH, there's Timna Crom, there's Thrasios Vile Smasher of the past. Like all these decks that just play all these colors, just have access to the best cards. And like, yeah, the commanders are fine; they're good value pieces. Like activating Thrasios always feels good, but it's not going to be what wins you the game. Whereas because that's the only uncommon you get in this deck of a bunch of commons, you
Yeah.
want to rely on that. It's going to be much more powerful than any other card in your deck more often than not. It's going to be the card you have access to all the time. So if you have a combo that can be enabled by, or your combo outlet can be your commander, those are going to be the ones that you see more often, the ones that perform better, and really the ones that are the backbone and what the deck is based around. You're not going to get those good stuff decks very often just because it's really hard to have like just a good stuff deck when everyone's kind of doing fair stuff. There's no way to really lock people out of the format or out of the
Yeah, we
game.
don't have stacks.
Ooh, that's a hot button topic. But yeah,
Yeah,
like
that is fair.
we don't
Traditionally.
we don't get the traditional stacks effects that there's no rule of law in the deck. You could play. There's some in the command zone you can play, but you don't get multiple copies of those kind of stacks effects that can completely change a game in cEDH. So
Yeah. And also, something I think is pretty cool is like it's a little bit more towards the like casual EDH decks are like super based on their commander typically because they're trying to like oh, this is cool, I want to do it. I think Pauper EDH, even like cPDH, right? You're trying to win. So you would think maybe you wouldn't base it completely around it, but because it is like the decks don't get as much tutor, right? So you can't look for those incredibly powerful cards in the 99 as consistently. And your commander is going to be generally more powerful than anything that is found within your deck. It means that you do get to like really build around these cards, and that makes really interesting decks where like, oh, this random uncommon has like a cool activated ability. No other format would this really see play. Like Vizkopa Guildmage, you know? I really doubt Vizkopa Guildmage was tearing up any formats. I can't say. I wasn't playing like standard when it was released. But like that activated ability when you're building your deck around it can be really strong.
Yeah, definitely. And like you'll see, because commanders, you'll see these cards that you've never heard of just be insane with a commander pairing. Like we talked about Malcolm a little bit ago. Malcolm cares about pirates. You can look all you want. There are not very many good common pirates. So what you do is you play all these type changing effects, and all of a sudden you're playing Trickery Charm or Wings of Velas Vel, and it's just like, what are these cards? These are not cards that I have ever seen play in any constructed format. What are we doing here? And they, they're staples in that archetype, and it's cool.
Yeah.
And like Tidal Bore and Tatiova, and we'll talk about that. But like, there's all these like random cards that have these very like niche interactions that really like can be the backbone of certain decks and certain archetypes, which is cool.
Yeah, I can almost guarantee that before people were playing this format, no one ever saw a Trickery Charm be played and was like, I am about to lose. Like, for those of you who don't know, Trickery Charm is a 1 blue instant with 3 different modes. It gives something flying. You can look at the top form, put them back in any order, or you can make a creature the chosen type until end of turn. So like this really random instant, like awful combat trick or card selection or type changer, which generally is a useless effect, is like a huge win con in one of the strongest combo decks in format, which I think is super cool. Like I never knew this card existed. This card sucks. This card's awful.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, that's one of like the cool things about PDH. You're looking and finding all these new cards as people brew, and as new uncommon creatures are printed. There'll be new like strategies that are all of a sudden awesome, or new cards that are awesome that didn't make sense before. Like Trickery Charm, before Malcolm, no one was playing that card, like we talked about. Same thing with Tidal Bore. It didn't really do a lot. There's plenty of examples where there's just cards that are sitting out there waiting to be broken by the printing of a future card. It happens in every format, but here we're just looking for uncommon creatures and the silly stuff they can enable. And who knows? There's tons of commons that people have never thought of or looked at. I'm sure that we'll end up seeing their being in the limelight, I guess, in cPDH in some form.
Yeah, for sure. Something I was just thinking about, because you touched on it earlier. Not that I do want to say, I don't want this whole podcast to be like, we're better than cEDH. I think it's a really cool format. It's the easiest touchstone of comparison. But I know that in cEDH, a lot of times 4 and 5 color is super popular. There's really not that many uncommons that are even 3 colors. So a lot of the time, something interesting about this format, it could be a pro or con depending how you feel, is dual color is really common. Pretty much every like color pairing has at least one deck. Some have more, like Izzet and Simic generally just, they have a ton of decks. There's a lot of really good Izzet and Simic decks. Some other ones like Orzhov have a couple to go off of, but yeah, basically every color dual combo you can think of has at least one deck. But unfortunately, we don't really have many wedges. There's like, what's her name? The Grixis lady. The
Cormella. Yeah, so the
Cormella. Yep.
The Alara block 3 colors, and I'm blanking on their name. The Shards, that's what they're called. The Shards have a few commanders that let Cormella is probably one of the most popular. There's Ligrella, but when you get into the wedges, Teamer, Mardu, like we have one commander for some of those. Like for Teamer, you get Bear's Companion, and Bear's Companion is completely fine, but it's not something that's getting people excited. Making a bunch of bear tokens.
I will say, you said fine. It is a 5-mana 2/2. It makes a 4/4 bear on ETB, but it is a 5-mana 2/2.
Right. So
yeah, it's not, which sucks because I love Teamer, but yeah, it's not very exciting.
Yeah, we don't get the cool benefit of cEDH where, oh, they've made all these 2-color partners so we can just play whatever colors we want. And worst case scenario, you have Thrasios in your command zone. Like,
Yep.
it would be cool, but it would also be kind of boring. So like, it kind of operates both ways. There's pros and cons to it. But yeah, for the
We
most part.
do.
Oh, good.
We get backgrounds is something that is pretty
Yeah.
cool. A lot of the backgrounds are pretty strong because specifically the uncommons. I know that there's been debate whether or not that uncommon background should be allowed. I don't really know anything about that, but as of right now, I know in most tournaments all uncommon backgrounds are, and those act like partners in a lot of decks.
Yeah, no, the partners and the backgrounds have been really good for PDH. I mean, if you think of some of the decks, there's a lot of decks that play them that do really well. We talked about Malcolm already. Partners, Gut is someone we'll talk about where it is a deck that's really powerful and relies on the background mechanic. Abdel, Adrian Gorion's
Yep.
Ward is one of those. So we get these cool 2-color decks that you get to have one really powerful piece, whether that's the background or the commander or just one of the partners, and you can pair it with whatever other color you want. Usually you want to focus on a card that, in the command zone that gives you something, but I've seen plenty of decks that are just, hey, I really want this one commander, and then like I want blue. So I'm going to play a blue
Yeah.
background or something. So, yeah, it's really cool. It's different than cEDH in that regard. The other cool thing is you get to play non-legendary creatures in the command zone. So,
Oh
you
yeah,
know,
that's really important.
yeah, so there's, plenty of creatures that have been printed at uncommon that have really unique abilities that you're just not going to find equivalents of in, rare mythic legendaries, which is what, regular EDH is limited to. And so you get some cool interactions, some cool new like combo-y stuff. Um, you get
Yeah, I did a quick look up on Scryfall. It says there's 4,345 uncommon creatures. Obviously, I'm not trying to say all these random, like, vanilla uncommons are viable commanders, but it's just to say that there's a lot of uncommons to look through. And a lot of them are just like, oh, this random uncommon with a cool activated ability actually is pretty good once you have it as your commander.
Yeah, and that's not even getting into like the combinations of partners and backgrounds. And
Yep.
so, I mean, yeah, the number
Yeah.
is huge. So there's tons. The other cool thing is, this format has been around for a while in some capacity. I remember talking about Pauper Commander decks, a decade ago on MTG Salvation, but it's now it's getting to the point where there's more people involved. It's being viewed. Some people are viewing it with a more competitive mind. So there's these more efficient decks, these more powerful decks that are coming together. But there's still plenty that's unexplored. There are new decks that pop up that, Gretchen is a deck that, Gretchen's been around for, a couple years, I think at this point. And then it started, blowing up towards, the end, mid to late last year as a really powerful deck. Yes. And like, you and I have been working on Nivix Guildmage, which has been sitting around forever and just not really played a lot. There's all these
Yeah.
decks that there's just not enough people in the format right now to brew and tinker with everything. And so people also just like want to play their decks for a while. So there's still brewing happening. There's still new cool stuff being found out every day. And, I wouldn't be surprised if, at any given tournament, there's a deck that was largely off the radar that takes it down out of nowhere.
Yeah, for sure. I think like a lot of the most powerful general things, like a lot of the most powerful combos have kind of been found and a lot of the most consistent like ways of finding them. But the thing is, like, the way decks are built generally, even if like you have a similar combo win plan, like a lot of the blue decks run a Peregrine Drake combo, a lot of times they're really heavily based around their commander on how they're going to find it. Like the Nivix Guildmage we talked about, he has an activated ability where it's just one red, one blue, and a generic to loot. And so he can just kind of like move through his deck. He has another activated ability to copy a spell for 2 generic, a red and a blue, copy any instant or sorcery on the stack, right? And so instantly you get infinite combos from copying spells. You get to loot through your deck. And so even if he's running a really basic combo in his deck, he gets to look through his deck in a very interesting way and interact with the game in a really interesting way.
Yeah, and it's just, and that stuff, there are similar things in cEDH for sure, but there's just like tons of cool stuff that you get to see that in as an uncommon in the command zone that you may not get to see, and creatures you wouldn't normally that wouldn't necessarily make the cut in EDH decks,
Yeah.
that all of a sudden are powerhouses. So, um, but yeah, and I know we talked about it, one other benefit being the price. The other cool thing is a lot of how it's played. When you're talking online, there are a handful of Discord servers where you can catch games with people. You and I play all the time in a handful of servers, and so there's plenty of ways to play digitally too, where you don't even have to own the cards necessarily to play and get games in and to test stuff. You can use Cockatrice. The big thing is using Moxfield in combination with Spell Table and the playtest feature on Moxfield, where you can tinker with a deck and play it, minutes after you tweak it. And you don't have to own it. You don't have to wait for cards to show up in the mail. You don't have to print out proxies. Cards are readable. Like, it's great. So
Yeah.
it's just a super, super accessible format, which is really cool.
Yeah, no, it's really sick. I enjoy it a lot. Playing online is nice. I know, yeah, you're talking about, you tinker deck then play with it. I'll like go and I'll load up Spell Table and then I go to Moxfield and I look, I'm like, this deck is 101 cards. I was editing this 4 minutes ago. God damn it.
Yeah.
You have to,
Definitely have had situations where I have placeholder lands and then load into a game and realize I don't I
oh
only have
yeah.
one color basic lands, and I'm like, okay, well, give me a
I
second here,
love
guys.
that.
So
Yeah, I know. I got like 4 turns into one game, and I was like, guys, I'm only finding islands. What is this luck? And I played that whole game because it was like a deck with mana rock. So I found my other color of mana, and I was like, what was that luck? I had like eight islands and no mountains, and I closed the deck list, and it's 35 islands. I don't even have non-basic lands in there.
yeah, my favorite memory was I was playing a Vohar commander, Pauper commander list, and I had Bubbling Muck as a combo enabler. Only had
And no
islands,
swamps.
no swamps, and I drew Bubbling Muck early, and I was like, oh yeah, this is awesome. I'll get there. This is like the piece I need instead of High Tide. I drew both of my 4 swamp islands, so it ended up working out. But I was never gonna see a basic swamp, so
Wait, you comboed with Bubbling Muck without like a basic swamp?
yeah, I just had I got really lucky and drew into the 2 dual ones. But yeah,
Oh, that's so stupid.
yeah, yay magic. But
Yeah.
so yeah, like I said, we've been playing a lot here recently. I know you and I both kind of met and we're playing in the Philadelphia Riches to Rags tournament, and
Yep.
we probably played we probably each played one of our favorite decks at that tournament, I would say. So I figure we can kind of give people a feel for the decks we play, kind of, and talk about other decks that are popular. I'm getting a lot
Yeah.
of shine right now, or performing really well, and then maybe some more of our rogue ideas. The decks are kind of more off the beaten path that we're tinkering with, and maybe hope to turn into something. So what about you? So what, like, I guess talking about the Philly tournament, what did you
Yeah.
end up playing? How'd you do? How's the deck work?
Yeah, so a quick disclaimer before that. We are both combo fiends. I do want to say that generally, like, combo is really popular in tournament. It's a very consistent way to win a whole game, but there are certain decks that can leverage combat damage. There's some like more mid-range, sit around removing threats, building up a solid board. Like, there's a lot of different viable strategies. A lot of these meta decks will be combo decks because that's what we enjoy playing, but I did just want to put that out there.
Yeah, I mean, one thing when you're talking about a multiplayer format, it's a lot easier to just win the game as opposed to killing 3 people. So
Yeah.
that's one thing that you'll see.
Yeah, in a general sentiment, just like finding these cards that fit together to instantly win the game can be a lot easier than dealing a total of usually not 90, because sometimes other people will incidentally do damage, or maybe there's another combat damage deck at the table. But collectively dealing 90 damage to other players is usually going to be harder. But there are decks that can leverage it, which we will touch on one. But to start with the deck that I played at the tournament, which I love, still one of my favorite decks, and I think generally considered to be one of the best decks in the format, definitely up there, is it Guildmage? Super random, uncommon, do you know what set he's from?
The original Ravnica block, I believe.
Oh my god, that's old. Not that old, actually, but yeah, so he is a 2-mana 2/2. Both of them are hybrid Izzet mana, so can cast him with any combination of that. And he has 2 activated abilities, which is the huge thing. So the first one is 2 generic and a blue to copy target instant spell you control with CMC 2 or less. So you put it on the stack, and if its CMC is 2 or less, you can copy it for 3 mana. And he has the same ability, but 2 generic and a red to copy a sorcery spell. So instantly, this deck is based around casting cheap instants and sorceries, on the stack, holding priority and copying them to generate value, because you cast an opt, right? Solid spell, a little bit of card selection, but then you copy it and suddenly that is plus on card advantage. And so in these slower, grindier games, you can get away with doing things that maybe for the effect is mana inefficient, but the card advantage is so powerful that it can really be solid, especially combined with the fact that these abilities make infinite combos incredibly easy. The main ones I go with in this deck are Lava Spike and Desperate Ritual within Splice into Arcane combo. You cast the Lava Spike and then you splice the Desperate Ritual onto it. So this will create a Lava Spike on the stack that gives you 3 red mana when it resolves. Really cool thing about Izzet Guildmage is it copies the spell exactly as it is on the stack. So if I copy that spell, every time it resolves, it's going to give me another 3 mana to cast another or copy another one of those Lava Spikes. That's infinite Lava Spikes, kill everyone at the table. Aside from that, this deck just uses Dramatic Reversal with a bunch of Mana Rocks. You have Mana Rocks that generate 4 more. That means you can put Dramatic Reversal, copy it on the stack. It's going to untap all your rocks for mana to put another copy on the stack. Infinite mana. And really cool thing about Guildmage, he's the outlet, he's an engine. So you have a Lightning Bolt, infinite mana, that's infinite damage to everyone at the table. You have any draw spell, infinite mana, that's your entire deck. So it's just a very streamlined deck with very efficient win conditions, and it kind of has that Quark Sakashima feel where I only need to dedicate like one slot in my deck to like a card that is specifically a win con, because any spell, if you cast enough times, it's a win con. You cast an opt 1,000 times, that's a win con. So
yeah, and
it's a really cool deck.
And you're getting to copy your cantrips throughout the game too and dig, so you get the benefit of that. And you can just kind of sit back, play a draw go style game, copy removal, deal with what you have to worry about, and then just get there. I think the big thing, and maybe you agree or disagree, the biggest the issue that deck has is just making sure Izzet Guildmage stays in play, because once you start having to cast it for huge. 4 or 6 or whatever, it becomes a lot less than ideal.
Yeah, for sure. And it has the Izzet thing where Izzet is probably the best like color combo and format for removal, aside from maybe Rakdos actually might have better removal. But just in general, it gets to run a lot of removal. It gets to be the table police a little bit. But yeah, it gets to like, dude, just casting Impulse and then copying it. Ooh, that feels good. Looking at 8 cards, choosing 2 of them. It definitely feels fantastic. It's a deck that relies really heavily on Mana Rocks because it is a non-green deck that needs a lot of mana. But that fits right into the Dramatic Reversal plan, so it's not a huge deal.
Yeah. And then kind of on the opposite, or maybe not opposite, different side of Combo Town, we'll say. So when I was in Philly, I played this Gretchen Titchwillow deck. Gretchen is a 2-mana Simic commander. An 0/4, so just sits there and absorbs beats. And she has an activated ability that for 2 colorless or 2 generic, a green and a blue, you draw a card and then put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. So the goal of this deck is to ramp. Not necessarily through ramp spells like Cultivate Rampant Growth, but more so through auras that enchant lands. So Wild Growth, enchant a land, it adds an extra green. Fertile Ground, enchant a land, it adds an extra mana of any color when you tap it. These things that make lands generate more than 1 mana. You're playing Simic Growth Chamber as well. And then you play a bunch of land untapping creatures. So Arbor Elf, which untaps a forest. Juniper Order Druid, Blossom Dryad, Rime Tender. There's all these cards that just untap to untap target land. So you stack up these lands that make a bunch of mana. And you kind of you get to play the draw go game too, where at the end of the turn before you activate Gretchen a bunch, ramp a bunch, putting lands that you draw or just drawing cards. And then eventually you combo off by using Freed from the Real, which is an aura for 2 generic and a blue that you'd enchant a creature and then it gains 2 abilities. For a blue, you either untap it or you can tap it. So you put it on a land untapper, tap to untap a land that generates more than a blue mana. Use that, at least that blue, to untap the creature, rinse, repeat. And with Gretchen in the command zone, you draw your deck, you find a way to win. You have Capsize, you have Compulsive Research, you have Archaeomancer. there's a billion ways to get there once you have infinite mana and your entire deck in your hand. So um, winning from there is easy. It gets to play having an 0-4 in the command zone that you get a cast on turn 2, and if it dies, you don't care too much, is pretty cool because you're making so much mana. Getting to play the draw go game and leave your answers up to deal with other people is one of like my favorite parts of the deck. You get to play, stuff like rewind. You get to play a ton of bounce spells. You get to, cast Weather the Storm and gain a bunch of life when someone else is doing stuff.
Oh, I love Weather the Storm. Yeah.
Yeah. So leaves a bunch of mana open, gets to play the control game, and then just gets to ramp a bunch. And who doesn't love drawing cards and ramping? So,
yeah, I would say that package of Freed from the Real and Company. There are a couple other ones.
Yeah.
There's the Galvanic Alchemist, I believe it's called, where it gives an ability to a creature. It like soul binds with it and lets the creature untap for 2 generic and a blue. So that means your land has to tap for 4 mana. Not as hard as it might sound, to be honest. A lot of the land enchantments can get out of hand really fast, especially when you're drawing through your deck with Gretchen.
Yeah, and there's a few different lines too. Like there's the Boro Breeze Caller. We won't get into the nitty gritty of how the deck works, but yeah, there's a handful of ways to go infinite and then get there. So.
But yeah, those Simic decks are probably there's like is it Guild Mage and the Simic decks are kind of different. It like shows a good kind of range of the combo decks where the Simic decks are really good because they have a lot of redundancy, and so they can consistently find their combo a lot faster, whereas Guild Mage has the card advantage and the removal to slow the game down and the card selection to eventually find his couple pieces, So there is interesting ranges like that where a lot of times the Simic decks are looking to present a win very quickly, protected by counterspells because of how much mana they have and how much redundancy they have. So there's like, even inside of combo decks, they're not all just like turbo go 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 or I'm gonna stumble into my combo eventually. There's a nice range, which I really like.
Yeah, I mean there are some of those turbo decks. They're kind of more fragile, but they can threaten. Like we said, there are turn 1 and 2 wins that are able to be pulled off in this format.
There is technically some Magic Christmas land, perfect hand. Go first, I win turn 1. Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to be more inconsistent, but they exist. There's the decks that want to wait and draw out the game, and then after everyone's resources are spent, that's when they go for it. Some of that's just play style, but then there's more than just combo too. There's Voltron styles of decks that do well. First thought is Dargo anything. Dargo is super powerful.
Dargo's just a broken card, super broken.
Yeah.
Insanely broken. Especially if you account for the fact he is 7 power. Commander damage is 16 now, so if you pump him up to 8, that's 2 hits, and there are also spells that for some reason give a pirate +1/+1 and double strike, which means Dargo instantly kills you.
Is Dargo pirate? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, Dargo's a pirate. What?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean,
yeah, Dargo. I hate Dargo. Yeah. I don't like Dargo, but he's good.
Dargo is very powerful. There's combo Dargo.
He's a giant too.
Yeah, there's aggro Dargo. There's even slow Dargo. Like you can play Dargo however you want. It's one of the best commanders paired with anything. Kedis is probably the most common one. Emberclaw familiar. That way you're killing everyone at the same time when it deals damage. Whenever commander deals damage. Combat damage to a player, or no, it's just damage. I think it deals it to everyone else too.
Yeah.
So
no, I think it has to be combat because I don't think you can like put a pinger on Malcolm and ping someone. I think it has to be combat.
No, that actually is how it works. Or no, it is whenever commander control deals combat damage. I'm reading now. Okay. So combat damage.
Yeah, I was gonna say just look it up.
So Dargo, when it deals, its damage to one person, and say there's one person who can't block, all of a sudden everyone's hurting. So can become the arch enemy. There's Gut, True Zealot, and Inspiring Leader. We talked about the background combos.
Yeah, I think we could probably go into that deck now if you want. Neither of us particularly play it, but it's not rocket science.
Yeah, the hardest part about playing that deck is figuring out who to kill when. It's very powerful. Yep. It puts a lot of. So for those who don't know, Gut. When Gut's in play, it's a 3 mana 2/2 legendary goblin shaman. Whenever you attack, you may sacrifice another creature or an artifact. If you do, you create a 4/1 black skeleton creature token with menace that is tapped and attacking, and then, like we said, also has choose a background. So most commonly, it's been paired with the background Inspiring Leader. Inspiring Leader is a white enchantment, costs 2 and a white, and commander when it's in play, commander creatures you own have creature tokens you control get +2/+2. So those cool 4/1 with menace skeletons that we were just talking about become scarier 6/3 skeletons with menace, as if they weren't scary enough. And
Yeah.
the way most people are playing the deck right now is play like chromatic spheres or token makers turns
Things
one
that
and
want to hit the
two,
graveyard.
and then play your gut on turn 3, attack, and you have a 4/1 skeleton with menace on turn 3, and it's just going to get worse and worse, from there and snowball. So,
Yeah,
the
the
deck
deck
is
gets out of hand real fast.
it gets real threatening real quickly. It's more of a go wide deck as opposed to Dargo is all in on Dargo. But yeah, I mean there's those kind of aggro-y decks. There's some
Which is interesting, just because, like, if you think about it, that's a Boros deck, and I would almost never think of Boros as like a cEDH, or even like looking at cPDH. I would never assume that a Boros deck could be one of the best decks in format, but Gut is insane. Making a 6/3 every turn gets out of hand really fast.
Right. And and there's everything in between. There's plenty of mid-rangey control decks that have combo finishes, or just, aggressive combat decks that, in various color combinations. And so if you like playing a certain type of way in Constructed and Commander, to the extent it's, not super contingent on very specific rares, or uncommons or cards we don't have access to in PDH. You can find something that suits your play style. You can find it probably in a color combination you like, and you could probably find a way to make it competitive if you put the work in. So, yeah, I mean it's really cool. Just the variety we've seen as the format grows and as more people are tinkering and brewing and maybe even building some spicier stuff. I know we talked. Nivix Guildmage is one we talked about. We've been working on. It's not necessarily
which has generally it's like one of those things where this is a really cool card, but a lot of times it was overshadowed because is it Guildmage just on paper way easier to combo with? But Nivix Guildmage has a lot of really cool, unique things about it that is it Guildmage doesn't gain access to, because Nivix Guildmage can copy any spell. It doesn't have to be CMC2 or less. So instantly, that's massive.
Yeah, and you can loot. It has that. Whereas with Is It Guildmage, you have to have a way to win after whatever. But say Nivix, you can just generate infinite mana. You can then find your way to win after the fact. So
I've definitely been sitting there in tournament, and my hand is like, at the time I was running Hidden Strings, which is just another way to generate infinite mana. So I'm sitting there and I have Hidden Strings and High Tide in my hand, which is infinite mana. I know no one has interaction, but I'm just like top decking a land, and it's like, this is the worst thing in the world. I can't win. I have infinite mana. I know they can't stop me, and I can't win.
Yeah.
Nivix Guildmage does not have that issue.
Yeah, and there's some other spicy decks that we've each been tinkering with. I know I've played Scholar of the Ages a bunch. It's not necessarily doing anything that's crazy different, but it's doing flicker combo in a way where you just need your commander and a flicker, and then winning from there is usually pretty easy. I've played Floodgate, which kind of does the same thing. I guess Scholar of the Ages, going back to that, it's a 7 mana creature.
It's 7 mana. I thought it was 5.
No, it's a 7-drop, 3/3 human wizard, and
casual 7 mana 3/3 cEDH staple, well known.
Yeah, the best in town. No, it when it enters the battlefield, you can return up to 2 target instants or sorceries from your graveyard to your hand. So you get a flicker spell, and then a way to like generate mana, and then from there, you go infinite. You have cantrips.
It's 2 Archaeomancers stapled together, which for even for 7 mana, in a slower format, like a deck like that, obviously it's gonna do better in pods that don't have Gut Leader in them. But cool decks like that can do well, especially it's like I feel like you can meta call pretty well in this kind of format too. Like if you think a lot of combo decks are coming, Scholar of the Ages can do work.
Yeah, if there's a certain benefit to being kind of the unknown sometimes. Granted, if you read Scholar of the Ages, it's not hard to figure out what you're trying to do.
It ain't rocket science what they're trying to do.
But the fact that it's 7 mana makes it seem a little less threatening. We still get to play High Tide. We play a bunch of rocks. Yeah, we don't want to have to cast Scholar for more than 7, but we can do it. So, I know you've been tinkering with, a certain blue green commander. I don't know if you want to talk about
Oh yeah,
that.
I could talk about Parcel Beast a little bit because Parcel Beast is a really interesting one. That's another one where it just kind of worked out that I like the ones that aren't legendary, which I think is cool. I do. Just going back to Gretchen for one quick moment, I think Gretchen's really cool because it is clearly like they wanted this to be a commander card. It's a legendary with an activated ability. It's Simic. Wizards loves their fucking Simic commanders being broken, but it's really cool that in this weird niche format, it is so strong because it's just kind of like, oh, this is like bootleg Thrasios. You like don't get a partner, and it's more, and it costs colored mana. But yeah, anyway, Parcel Beast is kind of like the cousin of Gretchen. It like is similar in a lot of ways, but different in other ways. So it is a mutate card from back in Ikoria. It
Drone.
is I love Ikoria, man. I think that set's cool, but it's 2 generic and a Simic, so 4 total mana, but that doesn't matter because you're mutating it. Quick mutate note, it is a casting cost, so it commander tax affects it, so if something kills your mutated Parcel Beast, it will be 4 next time. But the really important part of this card is that for 1 mana and tap the Parcel Beast creature, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield. If you don't, put it into your hand. So some important stuff real quick is that it doesn't make you reveal the card. So you can choose to put it down. Typically, if it's land, you'll slam it. Sometimes you want to save a Mystic Sanctuary, but just in general, you don't have to reveal the card, which is nice. It's slightly worse than Gretchen in the fact that it can't be any card, but the huge thing is that it is 1 mana. It's 1 generic mana to do this effect. Typically, you'd be like, oh, you have to tap it, you can only do it once. But since Mutate is a hilarious and sick mechanic, you can put it on a creature like Horseshoe Crab, who for 1 blue mana says untap Horseshoe Crab, which has essentially been errated to untap this permanent. That's just like how rules tell you to read the card. So if you put Parcel Beast on top of the Horseshoe Crab, it now basically reads cast Explore as many times as you have 2 mana, which, as you can imagine, gets out of hand extremely fast when you pair it with the same, bullshit of land auras plus land untappers, freed from the real combos. So it's like it's a spicier version of Gretchen that has like a theoretical much more explosive combo engine, or I mean a card advantage engine, but you have to assemble it. So, it's a really interesting deck. I love it. I think generally it's like lower floor, higher ceiling than Gretchen, but Gretchen, it can be a little up in the air, but it's a really fun deck with a really interesting commander. That like, what other format do you get to play Parcel Beast as like, this is my card? Like the most important, like one of the most important parts of my deck is Parcel Beast.
Yeah.
It's so sick.
I mean, I'll let you enjoy it. The fact that you have to have a primer and like crash course and mutate and all the funky rules,
Yeah.
that will turn some people off. But no, the deck is good. It's cool. It's interesting, and it's an example of stuff you get to see in PDH that just doesn't exist in EDH.
Yeah.
I think there's a handful of legendaries with mutate, but they're not they're not
They're all
doing the
like
same
combat
funky stuff.
focused, yeah.
Yeah. So, um,
They're like when you hit someone, return a creature with mutate to your hand, which is like in casual, that's sick, build a cool mutate deck. But in a more competitive, that's just not gonna cut it. But here, like suddenly saying draw a card if that's a land, put it onto the battlefield for 2 mana as many times as you want. And sometimes you have like 8 mana at the end of the end step before you. So you do it 4 times. You've probably put a land into play and drawn 3 cards. That's crazy,
yeah. No, I mean, it can definitely things can get out of hand. So,
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I was just gonna say it is really interesting. I think that Guild Mage and Parcel Beast are just excellent examples of like these really random cards that I had no idea existed. But after playing this format, Parcel Beast is one of my favorite cards. I think it's so cool and just really interesting. I think that that's one of the things I like the most about the format.
yeah, you get to find these new cards that you've never heard of or never looked at that you passed in draft, years back.
Yeah.
And then you get to play them alongside your lightning bolts, your counter spells, some of your rampant growths, your like iconic core, like color identity based cards, and then do fun things with them. So,
Yeah, for sure. I think interestingly, yeah, just saying color identity, it does make me think. I feel like color identity feels big in cPDH since you're more limited and generally you're just gonna be dual color. Like if you're playing a Simic deck, you're almost always going to be a ramp and card draw deck. If you're an Izzet deck, you're going to be slinging spells and like cantripping a lot of the times. If you're playing like a Dimir deck, you're going to be doing card advantage, removing creatures, and like tutoring. So it is pretty interesting that like things do kind of stick very close to like generally what is generally considered color identity.
Yeah, the magic the way Richard Garfield intended, right? You don't have as many of
Yeah,
these
this
color
is
shifted.
exactly how he expected
Yeah,
us to play it.
he expected mutate to happen. That's exactly what he had in the back of his head when he printed Sarah Angel. So, but yeah, I was gonna say, so if any of these decks sound interesting to you, if you want to like get into playing PDH if you haven't already, or if you just want to get into more games, there's a handful of places like we talked about. We play a handful of different ways, or I don't know if you've necessarily played any way other than Spell Table, but I guess first
Yeah.
we should probably talk about how people play online, and then the places where people can do it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I'd say right now the most common way people play is using Spell Table, which is Wizards' platform for playing online via webcam. So you can play via webcam, paper cards, playmat. You just have webcam and your cards, and you're good to go. Another thing that's kind of taken off is people using Spell Table in combination with a virtual webcam like OBS and streaming their screen when they're on Moxfield's playtest feature. So they're using Moxfield to build a deck. You're ordering cards, or you're thinking about, wanting to get some games in before you commit to buying the deck, or, budget site and you just want to build decks and you still want to play them. You can make your deck in Moxfield, click the playtest feature, use OBS to like create a virtual camera that's sharing your screen to Spell Table and playing that way. So you're playing a deck, you can tweak it, minutes before you play. It's easier. You don't have to deal with shuffling as the manual shuffling.
Yeah, you hit a button to shuffle it. You don't shuffle 100 cards, which is always miserable, no matter how much you've done it.
Yeah, you make tokens at the click of a button as opposed to scrambling to find the right one. So there's a lot of cool things that enables.
They have infinite tokens as well, which you can draw on online, which always great.
Yeah, there's lots of cool features, and they're constantly working on it. So that's been really cool. And then there's kind of more of the more traditional platforms that see play. There's Cockatrice, which is a downloadable platform. The good thing there is, it's really like rules are going to be followed. There's no real good way to cheat. All game actions are recorded. You're limited to what you can do. It's the most transparent when it comes to knowing what your opponents are doing and ensuring fair play, which is really cool. Yeah. And then there's also Untap, which is an online platform similar to Cockatrice. I think it's, for the most part, similar. It's just a little less common, but same basic concept. You play online, you click through phases, all that fun stuff. So,
have you ever heard of Xmage?
I have heard of it. I've never played on it. My understanding is the exact same thing as Cockatrice and Untap.
Pretty much. Although I did just remember, I don't know why, but they never figured out mutate on Xmage, so you can't play that. But Xmage is like, it is the most like, man, this is Java programmed freeware ever. But it does work, and it's actually how I started playing Magic. Was me and my friends wanted to try out Commander without paying for it. But I was just wondering because Xmage I think is really funny, but it works.
Yeah, I remember back, and I don't know if it's still supported anymore. Magic Workstation was like the precursor to Cockatrice in terms of like ones that
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I don't think it's supported anymore, but it was basically Cockatrice before Cockatrice. So I remember when that switch started happening. But yeah, I mean, so there's a handful of different platforms. Spell Table is probably the most common, followed by Cockatrice, and then the rest are much more infrequent. So
much like the format, a lot of them are super budget friendly because pretty much no one's going to care if you're playing with proxies, on your webcam, or if you're on Moxfield, absolutely free. So it's really easy to just get in and say like, hey, this deck seems cool. This format seems cool. Let me try it out.
Yeah. And so then once you know how to use those and you can look them up, whatever.
And people in Discord are super helpful.
Yeah. And speaking of Discord, so there's a handful of proper Commander Discords where people are talking about it. People are playing games. There are tournaments coming up, I heard. Word on the street.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah. So, so I guess we'll dive into those real quick. I'll do my plug here. So one server is the Sanctuary PDH server. we are a new server, and we started the server to kick off a tournament series. One thing about cPDH is everyone enjoys it, but there haven't been a whole lot of tournaments. There's been a few in Philadelphia and paper. There's one coming up in the Detroit area this summer. But there haven't really been a lot of tournaments. So hoping to get some online tournaments. This first one is going to be free to enter. It's on May 13th, so coming up here soon. Um, you know, and it's May 13th at 10 a.m. Eastern time. And first place gets $50 cash, a $50 Inked gaming gift card, and a handful of accessories from Quiver Time. We're very fortunate to get some sponsor support from Inked Gaming and Quiver Time. So shout out to them for being huge. And then, second through fourth are also walking home with $15 and some Quiver Time accessories. So not bad for a free tournament.
Yeah, so some milkshake money. That's what I always do when I would enter fighting game tournaments, and there'd be like 5 people there, so I get $10 for winning. That's a milkshake. Have a good time afterwards.
Yeah, worst case, you might have wanted to play games anyway, so you're just doing it more structured.
Yeah, with some competitive, you're gonna get some nice discussion because oh my god, we completely forgot to mention that. That's one really fun thing about the format is you're sitting there trying to do threat assessment, trying to work through the game, talking with everyone there. But yeah, usually in tournaments, people are they're much more willing to sit there and have a discussion about the game with you mid-game, which is interesting. That's something about Commander. You're not going to sit down with Modern and look at your opponent and be like, what's the biggest threat on this board?
Yeah, there's definitely a collaborative element when it comes to stopping someone from winning. And, we could talk that could be a whole nother episode, honestly, just like talking about how that dynamic. So, maybe spoiler of what's to come, but
it's not even necessarily like politics. It's just like politics are part of it, but mostly just like discussing with other players. It's not politics when a Simic player tries to put Freed from the Real on their Arbor Elf. That's not politics anymore. That's like we're about to lose.
No, it's fine.
I wish, man.
Yeah,
but yeah, no. So definitely try to check that out. I'll be playing in it. Bobby's TOing, so I don't think they're playing.
There'll be a Twitch stream where I'm talking. We have a handful of people from the servers who will be joining, and hopefully people playing. I want a good turnout, and then if it goes well, we're gonna have future ones where there'll be a small entry fee, and that just means more money going out to prizes. So,
yeah, and it's so fun. Dude, yeah, I went to the Philly tournament, and it's been so long. The last time I was competing in a card game tournament was something like Pokemon Standard in like 2017. I forgot how fun it is to compete in card games. It's sick,
especially in like this, like in the PDH community. And granted, I know there are a ton of people there who that was their first time playing PDH. I felt like, or maybe like the tournaments were the only times they really played, but everyone was just really chill, really cool, really fun to talk to. Everyone thinks the format is cool.
Everyone I met there was sick.
Yeah.
It was actually such a nice event. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, so it was cool. So I'm hoping same thing here, talking in the Discord, you'll find the same type of community where people are really cool, really chill, want to help each other, want to help, find decks that people like, have fun, play games. And yeah, that's what this tournament series wants to just kind of build off of and get people to win some stuff along the way. So
yeah, and oh god, we started here on Discords. Yeah, obviously gotta plug the tournament. So yeah, we have the Sanctuary Discord for that, but the next one that's a really big one is actually where I went to first, because the organizer for the Philly tournament was like advertising it, and I was like, this sounds sick, let me talk to people, I'm sure there's some kind of meta. And so this is actually the first place I went that recommended me is at Guildmage, the PDH home base. This is like technically the official home base for the PDH format. It's huge, very active. I don't think as many games go on in this one as the other ones we'll talk about, but this is a really great place to ask questions, ask for deck lists, just any general questions you might have. Like I said, I said, hey, I love like control, combo, I'm an Izzet guy. They're like, sick, Izzet Guildmage is broken, go for it. So they were super helpful. They helped me even update because I was handed a deck list that was for a pretty old meta, and so they're like, you're gonna want to look towards tweaking it this way, but just here are some cool cards to look at. So they were really great.
Yeah, and if you want to ever get your scratch your casual itch too, I know like they have a good chunk dedicated to that too, as compared to some of these other servers. So you can play it the same way you can play Commander. If you're into the casual games too, there's plenty of that you can do in Pauper Commander, and that there's that many more possibilities that kind of open up there. So
yeah, we're definitely competitive gamers, but that's not to say that PDH has to be competitive. Obviously,
Right.
I'm a huge casual EDH guy. I think it's such a silly and fun format. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, man, this kind of sucks, like in a stupid way, but it's so fun. It's
Yeah.
so sick.
Yeah. But yeah, and then like the third server we want to shout out and is the Common Connoisseurs Discord server. Used to be the Tryhards, but they have tons of games popping off in there. Tons of brewing talk. Tons of people just wanting to help each other. You know, Ryan and Clay run that server. They, you know, there's a spin-off database channel called cPDH Guide Discord server. Where it's kind of looking at the data from all the gameplay from the different Discord servers. So definitely get some games in there, get some deck help, talk shop. And yeah, like the community across all these servers, across the PDH community is just some. You'll find great people. Some, that's how Joe and I met, just talking PDH. So there's plenty of cool stuff you can talk about. Talk about non-PDH stuff too, cool people, talk about whatever you want. You'll probably have similar interests. So, and you'll get to jam some games, which is, the most fun.
Yeah. Odds are, if you look at any time of the day, I might be around. I haven't been playing. Man, school got me busy, which sucks. I was jamming so many games, but
Yeah.
Definitely need to practice some more because gotta. Oh my god, it's in 8 days. Okay,
Yeah,
it's fine. I'll just send it. I'll do it up. I'll do it up.
Yeah, I mean, I think cPDH Guide. There's been like hundreds of games this year recorded, and that there's who knows may have been not recorded. So
Oh yeah,
tons
I'm
of
terrible
games.
about putting mine in.
Yeah, every hour. I've seen games go any hour of the day, so it doesn't. Time zones don't necessarily matter. You'll be able to organize something, especially come the weekends. Like it just pops off. So, but yeah. So
and it does. Generally, there is like a very good like variety of decks. There's enough. There's plenty of people playing combo. There's plenty of people playing aggro. There's plenty of people playing mid range. So you do actually get a fairly good idea of how like a deck you're brewing will fare into an open field and not like a very closed field.
Yeah. And people are trying stuff all the time. If you talk to people, you're like, hey, I want to see what this looks like. Throw your best at me. Bring the Gretchens, bring the Malcolms, bring the Tadiovas, bring the Abdels, and you can get a table that to put your deck to the test. No holds barred.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. So I think that'll do it for us on this one. So I hope you guys enjoyed hearing us just yak about Pauper Commander, but definitely be sure to jump in some of those Discords, join the Sanctuary PDH server, and join that tournament on May 13th. Get some games in, try to play with us and everyone else, and hopefully you enjoyed this, and we're looking forward to talking about some more PDH and Magic topics here in the future.
Yeah, if this doesn't suck too much ass, we'll be back to talk about more specific things, the general stuff, We'll probably do some deck tech, some like, oh, what are the best blue cards in Pauper cEDH,
Yeah.
So it should be a good time.
Yeah. But for now, we'll sign off and look forward to chatting next time.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.